A few seasons back, the artist Saul Steinberg spent some time here with the grand title of Artist in Residence at the Smithsonian Institution. Steinberg is a short, intense man, now about 60, who is a living, walking, breathing puzzle. Though he draws cartoons for the New Yorker magazine, you're not going to look at it and guffaw because you've caught on. What's to catch on to with a sphinx wearing a hat, a crocodile posing with the Statue of Liberty, undecipherable penmanship coming out of a person's mouth, a lady on a chair staring at a question mark? If you call the New Yorker and ask what's going on, chances are that someone in the art department will tell you it's an exercise in linear metaphysics. Press on, ask what that means, and it's entirely possible that at that moment the specter of Ma Bell will strike and you will find yourself holding an unconnected phone. Well, it's just as well, for no one can explain to you what's going on in a Steinberg drawing, and even the artist, as we'll hear in a moment, usually makes things more complicated instead of less. But what manner of artist is he? He will pose wearing a mask he fashioned out of a paper plate. He was the first, at least as far as I know, to draw a human form, a naked lady, along the bottom of his bathtub. Though most of his drawings are so simple it's often remarked that a child could do them, he is a master draftsman who occasionally will pull his tricks out of a pocket and produce a geometrically stunning drawing of, say, the many ricochets of a billiard shot. Steinberg was born in Romania, perhaps the most anti-Semitic of all World War II countries. He fled, of all places, to the Dominican Republic in the Caribbean, from where he proceeded to contribute to the New Yorker. Harold Ross, the late founder and editor of the New Yorker, managed to get him to the United States in the midst of the war, how no one now recalls. I recently talked with Lee Lorenz, the art editor of the New Yorker, and put the question to him this way. One thing that strikes me about New Yorker drawings is that many of them are so very simply done that you often have the feeling, well, it doesn't take much talent as an artist. Thurber, for instance, never thought of himself as a good artist, and probably in classical terms it would be hard to make a case in favor of his being an artist. Steinberg, who's a very talented draftsman, can only draw faces in profile or full face, and that's all.
Well, I would dispute that. That's certainly not true of Steinberg. I don't think there's any challenge that he might set himself as a draftsman.
He never draws a face that's, say, a three-quarters look or a one-quarter look. It's either full face or full profile.
Well, I don't have a pile of Steinberg drawings in front of me, but I'm sure I could dig out some that would refute that. But after all, a style, as a man develops it, has to do with tooling up to present in the most direct and immediate way what he has to say, so that a cartoon, for example, is not like an illustration where you're presenting a great mass of material, all of which is important to getting the point across. A cartoon works just the other way. I think any artist working in this field has to learn to pare his work down, to eliminate non-essential material, so the idea gets across as quickly as possible. I mean, immediacy is the soul of wit, I think, and an artist who can put across an idea, and I think an idea of some subtlety, the kind of material we like to run, in a few lines, is certainly an artist. I mean, that is an art.
Well, it certainly is an art the way Steinberg does it. He is, after all, the man who said, "My work is a puzzle in the form of a drawing." By the way, for the sake of Mr. Lorenz, Steinberg also said, though not on tape, quote, "If it doesn't come out easy, it doesn't come out at all. I keep away from drawing that is hard for me. I'd never dream of doing a three-quarters profile. What do I know how to draw? Profiles, cats, horses, houses, clouds. I try to transform everything into something I can do." All right, enough said. Let's meet the man. I asked him first about this so-called Washington job of his.
It's a curious position, that it's a civilized one, and it's something new about Washington, about the fact of inviting somebody an artist to live in Washington for a while as an artist in residence. There is some tradition in the past. There is the Prix de Rome. There are other occasions where an artist is invited to spend some time in a certain surrounding and give him the opportunity to work there. Essentially, it's a change of coordinates, a change of latitude and longitude. I'm here to do what I always do, but I do it here instead of doing it in New York or in the country or in Europe or somewhere else. I work here. The Smithsonian is a philosophical society, an institution, philosophical in the old sense of the word. It contains all the knowledge, the possibility of knowledge. It has museums, countless museums. It has then groups that occupy themselves with zoology, with biology, with meteorology, with mineralogy, with a long list. It's an infinite list. While they may not have people in charge of conclusions, the basic elements are there. This is what I call a philosophical institution. Of course, it's natural for them to want to have an artist there, to be the equivalent of a witness during an exploration. It's not going to change Washington. It's impossible to change it. But this is something that belongs to the special chemistry, my presence here, the special chemistry of a philosophical society or institution.
Well, in that context, sir, I quote to you from the New York Times of last November. Everyone is waiting breathlessly and with a certain amount of glee to see what happens when Steinberg is turned loose on innocent, unsuspecting Washington.
Nothing happened. Washington, it's not something that will influence me. I've seen Washingtons before. Washington is a purely political city, political again in the highest sense, in the old-fashioned sense, of administration and of ruling and connected with the relationship between people on a large scale. Therefore, it's not supposed to be an emotional city or a eccentric city. The architecture derives from all the courts of the world, Versailles, Fontainebleau, Schönbrunn. All of them have had this natural architecture that represents their function, endless perspectives, endless avenues made for parades, and also for impressing the citizen with a sense of helplessness and hopelessness even in front of this massive, melancholy aspect of the caused by the perspective lines that meet the infinite. This causes a form of tiredness, exhaustion, that it's confused in the mind of the people with awe. And this is how all the capitals are. This is the professional capitals. In Brazil, they have built the city. It is based on this principle. And I have seen in Addis Ababa, in Ethiopia, some new palaces built for the government that are truly monstrous, but made probably on purpose. This is the peculiar sadism of the government architecture. Now, the fact that I live in Washington, I lived in Washington before, it's not going to influence me this way. Influence is not something predictable. It's not something that happens because of certain things that are visible. What may influence me, it has nothing to do with Washington itself. I found here, for instance, in this house, I found some good china plates, dishes, that certainly have been an influence on me, but of course I could have found this thing in any other house. I found a few books that are an influence. I met some people that may be an influence. God knows, some birds that I hear singing are an influence.
Do you influence them?
Them who?
The political birds.
Of course I influence them. Everything is influenced by the presence of anybody.
What about your method, sir? How does a picture start?
How does a picture start? These are embarrassing questions. I really wouldn't know what to say to it. The drawing and my way of working through drawing is a way of talking, of speaking, of describing something to myself. And I do it just as naturally as other people talk or touch or gesticulate. Drawing makes a lot more sense. It has much more clarity, and it fulfills a much deeper need than talking. What I told you so far is sufficient.
All right. How about the road that led you to Washington? You were born in Europe.
I can't give you now full confession, make a story about my life, the story of my life. This is told to girls to impress them. So you go ahead and...
well, I'm thinking of one very well...
Or ask me a specific question. I'm not going to tell you.
Well, I was really thinking of one cartoon of yours that's very well known, of a man looking over his shoulder at a sky full of place names. And many people believe that this is an autobiographical cartoon.
Yes. Well, it's I call it autogeography instead of autobiography. It's a biography based on names of places where I have been. Well, I lived for a while in other places I passed by, but I liked them. They stayed in my mind. And all these names stay with me. It's not that I can efface them. As long as I have memory, they stay with me, they change me, they are my luggage. These are my suitcases, my heavy suitcases, this past experience of geography. Of course, I have other suitcases. It contains names of people. I didn't put that one. That's a different drawing. I didn't show it. Then I have names, the other suitcases full of dates. Let's say I have 1942, an important year.
Why?
Oh, well, I know why. Lots of things happened. Was one year that I remember very well. It lasted a long time. It took a long time to go.
Wasn't 1942 the year that you left Santo Domingo for the United States?
Yes, I came here. It was a year full of emotion, full of things that happened. The days were long, the weeks were long, the months were long, the whole year was a monument. And then there is 1958, for instance, I can't remember. Nothing much happened. I was very happy, probably. I was working quietly, but nothing sensational, nothing that caused me to think of that year as a landmark. So I regret when these things happen. I didn't pay attention to that time. I didn't honor it.
A lot of your pictures are about sports. Baseball. You have a whole series of baseball pictures, and billiards and fishing and so on and so forth. Does this, do these reflect your own interests?
Oh, yes. I was involved in baseball. Baseball, I thought, was the key to the American political and social life. I thought of it as being a very profound, very poetic game. And it took me a long time to understand it properly. I studied, I went to games. Finally, I took a trip with the Milwaukee Braves to understand it better. And matter of fact, the staying in Washington now, it resembles in a way to that situation of traveling with the Milwaukee Braves, because I was at that time faced with situations that were not predictable. I've seen places that I wouldn't have dreamt of seeing. I talked to people that in normal times I don't know. And I found out a bit about the sport, about baseball, but mostly about the private life of ball players, juicy hotels where they stay, the entertainment they have. Well, it's a long story, but it was interesting and unpredictable.
It must have helped you to travel around the United States and to see America.
Oh, I travel often through the States, but this baseball is very important. It has the symbol of the psychological or, the true courage of a man alone in front of several variety of monsters. This is the St. George facing 9 dragons, including a curious dragon that is the picture of the opposition, that reveals the nature of the hero as being just another dragon. When the two pictures are facing each other, it's always interesting to see these two dragons snarling and letting smoke at each other. Well, it's a magnificent game. Then you have the man at bat has his own batting average. Now, this is something very beautiful. The batting average is ever present. The ball players carry their batting average written inside their cap. They always remember it. And this is very much putting down on the most elementary brass tacks the value of the man based on the lowest denominator, which is the essence of his power. And this is something that we should have. Of course, we know it intimately. There are many more interesting things about baseball, but let's go to something else.
All right. You have said that my work is a riddle in the form of drawing. Do you stick to that now?
The nature of an invention, a private invention, is difficult. We are accustomed to read, most of the time, public riddles. What are the public riddles? These are the traffic lights, let's say, and simple things, cliches of riddles. But our own riddles, the ones that we placed in front of ourselves, those are difficult both to read and to understand. What I do is to transform an idea into a drawing, and that already is a riddle, this transformation from one technique to another. Now, what the reader should do is to transform my drawing back to ideas.
In one of your drawings, I have it right here, we see a man standing in what appears to be a garden. The wind is apparently blowing. There's a crescent of a moon, clouds, trees, flowers wafting in the wind. And the man is surrounded by what appears to be a translucent box with the corners labeled ABC, etc. Can you give us some idea in words what this picture is saying?
This shows a man isolated from nature, isolated by a invisible geometric coordinates that represent his social and political life. This is the man who is involved in outside organization of life. He's not involved in his own organization, which is nature. And because he's not in touch with himself, he's not in touch with trees or animals or what have you around him. This is a man who is already inside the coffin.
In that drawing we were talking about before, about the man looking at the sky full of place names, I noticed that Toronto is one of the names there. Would you say...
I don't think Toronto is there, no.
No?
No. Look it up. Wait a minute. Taranto is in Italy.
Oh.
Taranto is the place in the in South Italy. A terrific place, a real southern place full of revenge and hidden violence and a beautiful harbor, practically an Arab city.
Mystery and unpredictability. Steinberg's favorite qualities in people as well as places. Perhaps he can be best explained by one of his closest friends, the writer Brendan Gill.
Saul Steinberg is I would say, one of the two or three greatest of our artists, the other being Steig and Arno. And I wouldn't know. If you ask Steinberg who was the greatest artist, he would say after me Steig, and if you ask Steig, he would say after me Steinberg. Saul came to the New Yorker as a refugee during the Second World War, and Ross was instrumental in getting him into the country and even succeeded in doing something which sounds impossible today by pulling wires in Washington. He had this man who was a foreigner, who was an enemy alien, who could scarcely speak English, become an American citizen and an officer in the United States Navy in the very same day. The strangest naval figure of the Second World War.
When I talked to Steinberg, his highest word of praise for anything was unpredictable. He seemed drawn by anything that was unpredictable.
What isn't unpredictable about him, he's a highly intelligent man. And like all Europeans, he speaks with authority about our country, about which he knows very little.
Well, he knows that's not true. He knows a great deal about the Civil War. He knows a great deal about baseball. He studied baseball and has done a lot of drawings about
tenaciously,
baseball.
Like any European, like any lycée student, he got up 2 or 3 subjects which he knows more about than other people. But he knows nothing about America. When he decided to study up the Civil War, he hired a Cadillac, was driven through the battlefields, and came back to tell us all about it. I don't object to this in him. I think it's an amusing aspect, because we get this from all our European writers. America is a much more complicated country than those sophisticated Europeans believe it to be.
But in the end, nobody is going to explain Saul Steinberg, and that's exactly why people are going to go on looking at his drawings and wondering what they mean for a long time to come.